Welcome to GoPowercat.com's Powercat Pregame Podcast, sponsored by Weddle & Sons Roofing. Now, here's Fitz.
It seemed like everyone in these parts was pretty fired up for last Friday's Arizona and Kansas State game, although between Big 12 foes, that 31-7 Kansas State victory was not a Big 12 conference game. This weekend, K-State opens conference play at BYU, and it looks to be a late night for many K-State fans. The game kicks off at 9:30 p.m. Central Time. Welcome to the Powercat Pregame Podcast. I am GoPowercat publisher Tim Fitzgerald, and if you're a regular listener or viewer of this show, you know what we're going to do. We're going to have Brian Hanley in just a little bit to talk about Kansas State's current status, how the Wildcats played, what they need to work on, and that kind of stuff. Then Ryan Wallace comes in to break down the opponent, this time the BYU Cougars, who, like K-State, is off to a 3-0 start. And then in the final segment, we'll hear from Chris Kleiman, Avery Johnson, and finish it up by checking in with our own Ryan Gilbert on the top games in the Big 12 and what are the odds of those games. That's all coming up on the Powercat Pregame Podcast, sponsored by Weddle & Sons Roofing. So let's get going and bring in former Kansas State offensive lineman. He was Michael Bishop's left guard, Brian Hanley. And there he is, Mr. Brian Hanley, our football analyst, former K-State player. Big B, we're 3 games in. We haven't even started the conference schedule, which arrives on Saturday in Provo, Utah. Do we know much about this team yet? I feel like Arizona was revealing, but not totally telling the story of what this team can be.
I think we know a little bit about them. We definitely know more than what we knew after Tulane.
Yeah.
But I think we know that when we want to play physical football, we can do that on both sides of the ball. I think that when we want to expand the offense and open things up a little bit, we can do that. Need to be able to get the ball down the middle of the field a little bit better, but we can do that and get some more consistency at the wide receiver position as far as catching the football. But I think we know a little bit more than what we did against Tulane. But again, I think that was kind of by design because we were doing more things than what we did against Tulane. I mean, the offense and defense is just not flat out vanilla.
Do you fear that the coaches will get reserved again with the big game with Oklahoma State coming up and not show as much on the field and maybe put themselves in a bad position at BYU on Saturday night?
I think it'll start that way. I think during the week in practice, look, you put in what you're going to put in and you run what you plan on running or what you could possibly run, and you work on your stuff all week. The play caller and the offensive coordinator, they get together and decide exactly what the actual game plan as far as plays in the game. That's different from your weekend work on what you're actually implementing. Totally different. So I think it'll start that way, maybe being a little bit more reserved, and maybe it's the same stuff that we did against Arizona. Who knows? But I think it'll start that way. Now the game gets tight, then that's a different story. I'm assuming we'll change some stuff, open up a little bit more, but I think they will. To a long answer short, I think what we did against Arizona is basically what we're going to start out doing against BYU. If it gets to anything more, we'll get there.
I feel like there's elements of this offense when both running backs are on the field with Avery. Who cares if they saw it on film? They still have to make the proper reads and get a very talented runner to the ground. I almost feel like this is what we do. Stop it. And I think that's a good game plan for Kansas State in a lot of these situations.
And I always said the same thing. You can have my playbook, but first of all, you don't know when I'm calling the plays. And as long as your tendencies aren't the same, it doesn't really matter. If you line up in a pro set and you run the ball right with the tight end right every single time, well, yeah, the teams are going to tend to know that. But if you mix it up, on what you're running, you can have the tight end right, but then run the ball left or throw the ball, do something different. It doesn't matter. And here's another thing, Fitz. It's not like these coaches from other teams don't have as much tape on you as they want. They do. So they know what your formations are. They know what your plays are. It's just a matter of, are you going to be the same type of person and have the same tendencies and call these plays in this formation, in these, formation and position groups? If you are, it becomes easier. If you're not, that's where the unpredictability comes.
I'm going to be interested to see when they start working the receivers in, because they're not a very big part of this offense yet. I mean, let's be honest. He tried to include Dante Cephas some last week, and that didn't work at all. They're going to have to get to that. Is this the game where they really need to do it, or can they stick with what they've been doing, do it well, and win this game?
I'll revert back to what I said earlier. I think whatever they did against Arizona is all they're going to start the game with. Again, if it doesn't work and they need to open up the offense more, they've practiced it. So right. I know people may panic and think, well, they can't run these plays. They haven't practiced. No, they're practicing all of the offense during the week, people. Trust me, that's happening. But as far as a game plan and what the actual plays are being called, I don't think they're going to deviate until they have to deviate from what they're actually doing. And that'll go even for Oklahoma State, Fitz. It's like, look, we're going to run what we're going to run, and we're going to put in a couple of extra stuff, but it is what it is. If we can get by and we're just doing this and we're successful, we're going to continue to do it.
I was really encouraged last week. The team looked more buttoned up. They looked more motivated. And I think the Arizona game, and sort of being a kickoff to the Big 12, even though it wasn't a Big 12 conference game, was important to them. It certainly was important to the fans. We saw that in the attendance and the volume inside Bill Snyder Family Stadium. Oklahoma State's next week, and I feel that they'll be the same way. But, Brian, this BYU team has made a lot of progress. They learned that they had to be more physical. They've gotten back to the physical roots of BYU football. They've blown through their non-conference schedule. They are better, but I still don't feel like we know them very well and really know what to expect out of BYU this weekend.
Well, the one thing is they're going to have a hostile, and again, I like hostile, hostile, raucous crowd. That's one thing that'll be on their side. They'll have that, especially after two non-conference road games for a Power 4 team is kind of unheard of. 2 in a row is unthinkable, but that's what BYU just did. So them coming back home for a Big 12 opener against Kansas State, a really good opponent at night, they're going to have their crowd on their side. But you are right. I'm not sure how much we know. I saw BYU in person when they played SMU. They were bigger than SMU, but they didn't have more athletes than SMU. K-State has more athletes than what BYU is going to bring to the table, and Kansas State is going to bring that physicality. That's where the difference is. Look, I think BYU is they're a better team. I don't know if they're a good team yet because we just don't know that. I think they're better than what they were. I don't expect the game to necessarily be a blowout or anything like that, but I think Kansas State will handle them. I do, because, again, they have more athletes and they're more physical than BYU.
As a former player, this 9:30 kick is kind of a new experience, 9:30 on the K-State clock. How do you think that will impact the players?
I mean, they're going to have to get a nap in. I mean, look, they're young guys. They don't go to bed usually, I would guess. I can just go by my experience. Again, that was 30 years ago. But even on a Monday, not going to bed till 12:30, 1 o'clock. It's just the way it is. You stay up. Not that you're doing anything crazy. You just stay up. That's the way it works. And so I would suspect these guys are going to have to take a nap during the day, because 9:30 is a long time, Fitz, a long time to be sitting around. Because you get up, it's game day, so they're going to get up early anyway, just because you are. And then to sit around all day and just watch football, go to some meetings, it's a long time. It'll have some effect. I suspect they'll get up, do a walkthrough at some point in time just to get their juices flowing and get their body moving a little bit, because you can't just sit around all day and then go play a football game. It's impossible. Not going to work.
Yeah, this is going to be an interesting experience for players, coaches, fans. Have to stay up, watch a game. As I've been saying, I'm all in on Big 12 After Dark as long as it doesn't impact me. Here we are. I've got to stay up late and cover a game, which is going to be kind of cool. And I'm looking forward to the atmosphere. Everyone says BYU at night with the mountains. They told me today on the radio I just did that the mountains have snow on the peaks. So it's just absolutely gorgeous. I'm looking forward to everything about this. Except, Brian, I just feel like this is a trap. Am I being paranoid, or is this a tangible concern? I keep having Tulane flashbacks, to be honest.
Here's the thing. I don't know if you're being paranoid, but I also don't know that it's necessarily a trap. Undefeated football team, first conference game of the year. If you're not paying attention, then what are you doing? That would be my first thought. But I don't know that it's necessary. I get that there's a big game next week, but they're all big. I feel like Kansas State has a mature locker room. If the locker room wasn't as mature as what it is, and the coaching staff wasn't as mature as what it is, yeah, I would say, you know what, look out, Katie bar the door, we're in for a barn burner, which we might be in for a barn burner anyway. But I don't think it's necessarily a trap game. I just think that BYU is probably better than what we think. It'll be a 4-quarter game. But if Kansas State comes to play, I think everything will be fine.
Yep, I agree with all of that. Rolling back a week ago, in hindsight, was Kansas State that good, or is Arizona that bad?
I think it's a little bit of both. Coming into the game, I think I talked on here and several different podcasts, the Big 12 Insiders. Make sure you check that out, by the way. I said that I didn't think Arizona was going to be able to match up physically with Kansas State, and that 100% played out to be true. Kansas State is probably pretty good. I think that's the case. Arizona may not be as good, but Arizona may look better against a team that's not as physical as Kansas State. I'll say that.
Okay. And I was really impressed by the defense and how they progressed, not just last week, but in the course of the game, how they adjusted and just sucked the life out of that Arizona offense. And it feels like something they can replicate on a weekly basis. Now, the one difference with this game is Jake Ratzlaff, the BYU quarterback, is mobile and will run, unlike the last two. So is that added wrinkle enough to make Kansas State's defense have a tougher time when the quarterback might well just tuck and run? He looks like Colin Klein out there. He's a big kid that moves pretty well. I'm impressed with him. How much does the quarterback run game concern you?
I mean, I saw him run. He runs the football. But I'll be honest. Fafita just didn't want to run it.
No.
He wanted to scramble out to throw. He is much more mobile than Ratzlaff.
Right.
Having said that, Ratzlaff is a hard runner because he runs the football. So two different styles there. But Kansas State tackles, Fitz. That's the thing. They have been tackling. And if you tackle, they're going to be fine. I saw him against SMU. Didn't look good. Did not look good. And I can tell you this for an absolute fact. SMU's defense isn't anywhere close to the type of defense that Kansas State had. They don't have the same athletes. They don't play with the same physicality. None of that. And Ratzlaff looked terrible in that football game. So I shouldn't say they shouldn't be concerned because you got to be concerned about everybody. I mean, it's college football, big time college football. But again, if Kansas State just does what they do, they will be fine.
So I take it you're predicting a K-State win. And you said into the fourth quarter. Do you think this will be a one-score game, or will K-State kind of open it up as the game progresses? Physical play wears you down.
Yeah, I mean, I wouldn't even be surprised if maybe BYU has the lead in the fourth quarter, something like that. And then in the fourth quarter, K-State just turns it on and they get a touchdown, they get a stop, maybe a turnover, get another touchdown. I'm not necessarily predicting that that's what's going to happen. I'm just saying I believe it's going to be a fourth quarter game. Look, we can't blow everybody out. That's not even, realistic to think that we're going to blow everybody out, especially on the road in conference. But there's nothing wrong with fourth quarter games. Nothing wrong with that at all. Even against teams that maybe you perceive not to be as good. I don't think BYU should be one of those at this point in time. But, yeah, fourth quarter game, I think K-State still wins by at least 10 points.
Very good. He's Brian Hanley, host of the Big 12 Insiders. Make sure you're checking out that channel. And, of course, he's a football analyst for us. here at GoPowercat. And oh yeah, Big B, you're going to be hosting a live post-game show, but not live after the game. We're not doing that to anyone. No. I mean,
No.
that show would start around 1 a.m. Central. Nope. That's well past your bedtime.
Yes.
You need to get your rest. So you and Cole Carmody, possibly Ryan Wallace, will be going live 10 a.m. Sunday morning to get everyone tuned up for Sunday and their schedules cleared for a little NFL action. I'm looking forward to that. I'll be in the air exactly when you guys are podcasting, so you'll be completely unsupervised.
All right. Hey, it sounds good. Sounds like a good time. No, I'm looking forward to it. I was willing to do it though, Fitz. I even told my wife at 1 a.m. I'm thinking it's probably going to be closer to 1:30. I was willing to do it, but thank goodness cooler heads prevailed, and we can do it in the morning. That's better.
Well, the secret is, if we did it at 1 a.m., I'd have to stay up to get it put up as content on the site, and now I don't have to worry about that. Brian Hanley, our football analyst at GoPowercat. On the other side of this break of the Powercat Pregame Podcast, sponsored by Weddle & Sons Roofing, we have Ryan Wallace with the BYU Breakdown. We'll be right back.
It's time to take a break for our sponsors. We'll be back with more from GoPowercat.com.
Weddle & Sons Roofing. Protecting homes, businesses, and providing peace of mind for more than 25 years. Weddle & Sons is your Tesla solar roofing outlet.
Now let's head back to the show for more K-State sports coverage from GoPowercat.com.
Welcome back to the Powercat Pregame Podcast, sponsored by our friends at Weddle & Sons Roofing. And now we move on to Ryan Wallace with your breakdown of the BYU Cougars. And after this segment, we'll have a little bit from Chris Kleiman, Avery Johnson, and we'll wrap it up with Ryan Gilbert with some of the odds from around the Big 12. What are the best games and what are the best bets? But Wally, BYU is a little bit better than we expected. They seem to have gotten back to physical football, that they weren't quite as physical last year, according to their coaches. And now they're trying to be more Big 12 physical. It looks like it's working, but what are your overall thoughts on the Cougars?
Yeah, I mean, you go back to the game last year, obviously K-State dodged them on the schedule, but, the team down the road got to play BYU in Lawrence and just ran all over BYU. And again, like you said, Fitz, that's so different than anything we've kind of become accustomed to traditionally from BYU. They've always been physical. They're usually the ones that are, giving you the contact, giving you the bruises. And last year it was flipped. And so Kalani Sitake really wanted to make that a point this year, not just in the trenches, but I think you see that, at the linebacker position. I think you see that obviously at the running back position and even a little bit at the quarterback position is they want to engage the physicality. They want to be the tougher team. And so far through, 3 weeks, they have been the tougher team. They were tougher against SMU, obviously tougher against Southern Illinois, and they were tougher against Wyoming, which, again, for K-State folks that aren't really aware, and I just kind of learned of this week, that's a big rivalry game, I think, for Wyoming. Maybe not for BYU. They don't look at it that way, but that was a game that Wyoming gets up for.
Yep.
And it wasn't ever a game, Fitz. And again, a testament to BYU because in a quote rivalry game, you kind of throw the records out. And that was all BYU start to finish.
Yeah. Wyoming is not very good this year, but they just didn't seem like they could organize themselves on offense for any sustained time. And to be blunt, I didn't think it was necessarily the BYU defense. I thought they were just kind of inept. But we did learn something from the SMU game. SMU is not bad. I'm not blown away by the Mustangs, but to roll in there and win, that's kind of a statement about where you're at. I would have bet heavy they were going to lose that game, and they came out with a victory.
I think if K-State fans and maybe even the K-State staff is looking to a game plan of any kind, I think you have to go to the SMU game because on one hand, BYU goes down there, did some nice things. I think on offense, they showed the physicality that they have and also the ability at certain positions to spread the field. Their receivers, it's interesting, Fitz, their receivers aren't anything spectacular. The Chase Roberts kid is by far their leading receiver with 15 receptions, 263 yards. but he hasn't scored yet, which is interesting. But they can spread it around, and they've got guys that can beat you deep. And Jake Retzlaff, who we didn't expect to win the starting job coming into the year, we thought it was going to be Jerry Bohannon, the old Baylor quarterback that went to South Florida. He comes back to the Big 12, and it ends up being Retzlaff, who finished the season as the starter last year for BYU. And going back to the SMU game, I think that was kind of Retzlaff's coming out party, so to speak. He was good against SIU, but against SMU, he showed the ability to stretch the field. And then when the running backs got hurt, it was Retzlaff, who, again, he went even on more of that in the Wyoming game of what he can be as a runner. And he's not Avery Johnson, but he's also not Colin Klein. He's kind of somewhere in between. He's more dynamic than a Colin Klein was, that was just kind of running up the gut for a couple yards, but definitely not Avery Johnson, but good enough to keep you honest on his feet. But if you go to the SMU game, I think one thing that caught my attention was the offense played well for BYU, but I thought the defense bent a little bit, and they're kind of this bend but don't break unit. Mm-hmm. And if you go back and look at the stats, BYU on paper is a top 20 red zone defense, Fitz. They've only had 3 touchdown scores, and they've only allowed teams in the red zone 8 times. Well, SMU was in there 6. 6 of the 8 were by SMU, and SMU only finished with 6 points on 6 red zone drives. K-State's more efficient than that. It proved to me that SMU had the athletes, right, to do a lot of damage between the 20s. They just weren't efficient enough when push came to shove inside the 20, when they could scrunch the BYU defense and tighten up. They couldn't figure out ways to then find some holes and gaps in that defense. And the other thing, Fitz, I'll throw it back to you with this, that really caught my attention in the SMU game. We would agree that SIU and Wyoming athletically do not compare to SMU, right, in terms of offensive playmakers. There was still, even in the Wyoming game, a lot of over pursuing by the BYU defense. They're so hungry and so aggressive and so physical. They can get to the backfield and they can come up and see the play, but a lot of times they don't make the play because they're over pursuing. 24 of their 26 missed tackles came against SIU and SMU. 16 of the 26 were against the Mustangs in Dallas. That, to me, kind of sheds some light on this BYU team is physical. They're big. They're going to bang you, bruise you. But I don't know if they're ready for the level of athlete, and I don't think they've really seen the level of athlete that an Avery Johnson, that a Dylan Edwards, that a Jace Brown, that some of these guys will present in the open field.
I would agree with you on all of that. But in watching the Wyoming game, Jake Retzlaff gives them the guy to lead that they believe in. He makes plays, and he will get out and move around, as opposed to the last 2 quarterbacks K-State's faced that would just prefer to stand in the pocket or, stay behind the line of scrimmage and look for a receiver. He'll tuck and run. So that's a new wrinkle for K-State to worry about. But there's something about this kid I kind of like. He's kind of a gamer.
Yeah, he's got some moxie to him.
Yeah.
An interesting kind of delivery, right? You probably saw it in some of the Wyoming game. I mean, he has this kind of Lamar Jackson, like, where he just slings it kind of from his hip, and he kind of balloons it and moonshot like his deep balls. You know what I mean? They've got unbelievable arc on him, but he's accurate nevertheless. He's definitely a guy that I think it thrives more on the deep ball. So the safeties are going to have to play honest. The corners are going to have to play tight. Again, I don't know if there's anybody in this receiving core that really frightens you like we saw last week with those receivers, even beyond McMillan. But these guys are kind of crafty. They're those K-State style receivers that just kind of know where the seams are and know the route tree really well, and they're going to run it crisp. And they get open and they get downfield big time. Their average per catch right now is almost 15 yards as a team. That's top 25 offensively in the country. And the other thing, now that we're seeing Jake Retzlaff and have to use his wheels more, they've suddenly become, and I think they probably would have been, even with a healthy running back room, a top 6 team in the country in time of possession, almost 34 minutes. That's the game plan for BYU. It's keep Avery Johnson off the field and keep Jake Retzloff on the field. The question is going to be, do they have enough in terms of their protection and in their running game right now to keep the K-State defense bending? Because rushing wise, it's a weird thing right now for BYU, Fitz, and it's honestly a credit that they're 3-0, because they were down in Wyoming to, I believe, their 4th string running back. They actually resurrected a former jazz musician in Miles Davis. No, I'm kidding.
It's a gutsy move. It's a really gutsy move.
But yeah, LJ Martin is a guy that K-State offered out of high school, really talented recruit out of Texas that was supposed to be their starter. He's probably got, dare I say, some NFL potential as a running back. He's injured. Hinckley Ropati is out. And then Enoch, I'm gonna butcher this, Nwani, their 3rd string guy, has been beat up. And it sounds like going into Saturday, they're not overly optimistic that any of those guys are going to be able to go. And if they are, they're not going to be 100%. So again, you're relying on Jake Retzloff to do an awful lot. And I was talking to some folks kind of around the industry, and they keep kind of coming back with the same thing that you and I have talked about with Retzloff. It's they admire the moxie. They think there's something there, but he's one of those, he's the type of quarterback that, I believe the quote that I was sent by, someone at the Power 4 level that has seen BYU is, he's just trying not to give the game away. He's the type of guy that I don't know is going to go out and win you the game. He's going to keep you in it, and I sense this from BYU too. It's they like what they're seeing from Jake Retzloff, but it's kind of this constant worry of is he going to, and we saw it a little bit against SMU, is he going to kind of try and force some things a little bit? Is he going to, be a little bit of that riverboat gambler? He's got a little bit of Brett Favre in him, Fitz, which, can pay off and can bite you.
Do you think K-State does much other than their base 3-3-5? This just seems like a matchup where they can line up and do their thing, maybe bring in, 3rd and long pass rushers, but kind of be in base and just do your thing defensively.
I would think that actually presents the right move for K-State. My initial thought was maybe you do go with the 4-man front, because again, I think if you make Jake Retzloff one-dimensional and you force him to be a pocket passer, he's good enough as a pocket passer, but he hasn't seen the pressure yet that I think K-State will deliver. And so the 4-man front gives you a better odds at pressure, and also completely eliminates, I think, the run game, especially when they're playing a 4th-string running back in there that just kind of lacks some of the dynamic ability. Now they have sprinkled in a true freshman that they're pretty high on, but I don't know, again, if that's the guy if you're Kalani Sitake, you want to be rolling out there for multiple snaps against a top 15 team right now in K-State. So I'm with you. I will say an odd man front, continue to do what they're doing, because we've seen Brendan Mott's good enough, even along an odd man front, to apply pressure. And I think the same will continue against BYU, even with the elevation, the altitude, which we can talk about in a minute. But also, these linebackers have proven that they can be really good pass rushers too. Austin Romaine is living in the backfield right now. We saw Desmond Purnell do it time and time again against UT Martin. Maybe that's dropped off a little bit the last 2 weeks, but he's still been really stellar. And we all know what Austin Moore can be. So I think that still gives you the defensive backfield presence, Fitz, that can contain the receivers when need be, and yet still, like you said, apply pressure just out of your base and keep that rotation heavy, because guys are going to be breathing a little bit harder in this one.
So when I did my segment with Big B, my philosophy is I appreciate them holding stuff back and, wanting to hide some stuff in the playbook. But when you go to the 2-back set with Dylan, DJ, and Avery on the field, I don't feel like it matters if they've shown it on film. because they can do so much differently based on the read option and where Avery wants to put the ball. I mean, it's truly RPO. There's 3 running options and he still can pass it. You can scout that, but you still are going to have issues stopping it. And I feel like that's just K-State's bread and butter, what it always needs to put on its sandwich to start the game.
Well, and going into researching BYU this week, I thought this was going to be probably the first test. Initially, I thought it'd be the first test for K-State to really this offense to I don't want to say win a game through the air, because I would be surprised if there's anybody on the schedule that's just going to completely negate the ground game. But again, maybe lean on it a little bit more to get the ball down the field. And while I still like the opportunity to do that, the BYU corners in the secondary are pretty active. I kind of like what I've seen from them. And I really like their linebackers. But this strikes me again, Fitz, as a game plan that K-State can really say, dare BYU to try and stop them on the ground.
Right.
I think the designed runs from Avery Johnson, and again, the sprinkling in of Dylan Edwards in certain ways, as you said, that maybe we haven't even seen yet, and DJ Giddens is the way to go. If you go back and you watch the SIU game, they had a playmaker at quarterback, dual threat, transfer from Murray State named DJ Williams. He killed BYU when plays broke down, had 15 carries for 121 yards and 2 touchdowns. And the majority of it came on designed runs. He's not even near the scrambler when in terms of improvisation that Avery is. Kevin Jennings for SMU, their quarterback that they played that game, was another dual threat guy. And I think that was a game where he was trying to maybe overly prove himself as a passer. But even he still had 9 rushers for 38 yards. And a lot of those were scrambles, again, kind of late scrambles where he was trying to keep passing plays alive and then decided to go off. Moral of the story, fans are going to be disappointed because, again, it could be another one of those games where the offense, they want to see more. And I still think K-State can just get by with the wheels of Avery Johnson and having him be efficient in short yardage passing and, win at the line of scrimmage. I think K-State can do that. The question is going to be, can the line hold up? And what kind of effect does the whole altitude, elevation, environment, the late start, all of that, how much does that affect K-State?
All very interesting, but maybe the most interesting storyline is special teams. K-State, of course, had the 71-yard Dylan Edwards punt return. BYU started its second half with Wyoming with a kickoff return for a touchdown.
Mm-hmm.
I feel like K-State special teams are much better this season. We've seen evidence of it, but turns out other people can play it too. This is going to be a big part of the game. You can absolutely shift a game. We saw it last Friday with the big special teams return.
Yeah, and I think, sticking with special teams, even outside of the return unit, I have a weird sense that they might need Chris Tennant on Saturday night, and maybe not to hit a game winner. But again, the way that this BYU defense is set up, they are very Tom Hayes-esque. It's that bend but don't break.
Mm-hmm.
They're really physical, again, between the 20s. And then when you get them down and if you're able to get in the red zone, they just lock it up. And so that's where Chris Tennant, who, at times has kind of been shaky on short yardage. I'm a big Chris Tennant guy, and I feel like this is a game that they might need him and would be a huge boost of confidence for him, because again, I think the Tulane miss was, as Chris Kleiman put it, really wasn't fair to Chris. But then there was the one miss, am I remembering that right, in Arizona?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
In the Arizona game that was in his wheelhouse. He should have hit it. They might need him in Provo. And again, I'll say this, Fitz, another reason why I think they might need him. BYU's 8-1 the past 2 seasons in home games that kick off at 8 p.m. or later. There's just something about that place at night. They're also 5-4 under Kalani Sitake in home games against top 25 competition. More importantly, 3-1 in their last 4. I think Oklahoma last year was the only team in the top 25 that they haven't beaten in their last 4 that's come into Provo. So they just seem to keep those top 25 opponents close, especially in night games. And so again, I don't want to make a huge deal out of the whole sea level thing and altitude and all that. But I mean, it is noteworthy when you think that K-State hasn't even remotely had to prepare for this since Colin Klein was the backup quarterback. Fitz, they were leaving Folsom Field. I was there working for you part-time, I think. I don't even know if I was full-time. I might have still been with K-Man the last time K-State had to prepare for altitude of any kind. And so again, like we said on the GoPowercat podcast this week when I was a guest there, this strikes me as a game that if K-State just goes out and executes, they win. And if it's in Manhattan at 2:00, they win fairly handedly. I'll say 2-score win, maybe more. But you add in all these other factors and, natural grass, another thing that K-State doesn't have to play on that often. And, the way BYU's playing with some momentum and some confidence, it's not going to surprise me if this sticks around and hangs in that, 7-10 range for kind of an uncomfortable amount of time late on Saturday night.
So in summary, pardon me for doing this, you're telling me the Latter-day Saints play better in later day games.
Good pull.
We better go to break now. We better go to break. Waiting on the other side, Chris Kleiman, Avery Johnson, and Ryan Gilbert. One doesn't feel like the others, but we'll have them all three on as the Powercat podcast continues. K-State, BYU, late night Saturday in Provo. I'll be there, and we will be right back.
It's time to take a break for our sponsors. We'll be back with more from GoPowercat.com.
Weddle & Sons Roofing. Protecting homes, businesses, and providing peace of mind for more than 25 years. Weddle & Sons is your Tesla solar roofing outlet.
Now let's head back to the show for more K-State sports coverage from GoPowercat.com.
Has been a very effective touchdown weapon for you guys in the red zone this season. What do you think that is after you've looked at 3 games?
I think they're doing a great job of selling some run fakes and then getting open because we have similar actions that we're running the football out of a couple of those wheel routes that Lofton's caught, and then Swanee caught the one on a scramble rule. But I think they're doing a really good job of selling run. I think they're doing a really good job of finding windows and being big targets for Avery. And Avery's got a lot of confidence in those guys too.
When you went back and watched film, did any players kind of jump out about maybe we didn't mention after the game that had really good nights?
Boy, we mentioned a lot of guys. So you must be thinking of one. I thought Sam Hecht played really well. I thought he played one of his best games. He's one I look at there. I thought Toby played a really good game and played more snaps. Austin Romaine always plays really well, and he made some good plays as well. But collectively, we just at every position improved and got better.
Also, Keenan Garber comes back for the bonus year. Struggled a little bit at Tulane, but came back and maybe made a game-changing play. How's his perseverance been paid off?
Yeah, it was a game-changing play, and excited for Keenan to have that success. And he's an old player for us, but he's only been a corner since late in the 2022 season. So I'm so pleased that he came back. It's been a huge addition for us to get him back, as well as some of these other older guys. But that was a big time play, and he's getting more and more confident. He's always been comfortable, but he's getting more and more confident in our defense.
That many carries, took more contact, and probably the most contacts you've had in college. How'd you feel over the weekend?
Honestly, my body feels better than it did after the Tulane game, so definitely some positives there. But, I feel pretty good. Obviously we had to start practicing and stuff a day early because of the Friday game last week. So going into a Monday practice, my body actually feels really good.
Back and look at the film. What did the offense do that worked so well?
I think it really just starts with Coach Riles, and hats off to him and credit to him because we came out firing and he came out aggressive. And then, like I said, Coach Kleiman, we could have went 3 and out. Coach Kleiman says go for it on 4th down in our own territory. We get it. We end up having a 15-play drive, and it was like we kind of got rolling after there. But I definitely think we executed a lot better, and we came out with a lot more fire, and we practiced a lot better that last week too. So it has a lot of things that kind of go into it, but I definitely would say it started with Coach Riles.
I know you played some last year, obviously, but has the game started to progressively slow down for you as well this year?
Yeah, for sure. And I definitely feel like from week 1 to week 2 and week 2 to week 3, things are definitely – I'm starting to see a lot of things out there and know where to go with the ball. And now it's just cleaning up my feet and stuff like that and just being able to make the right decision every time. But I definitely would say things are slowing down for me.
That was Chris Kleiman and Avery Johnson. And now we bring it down the home stretch with our own Ryan Gilbert to talk about the top 5 games in the Big 12, the spreads, and what we think your best bet would be. And I made a bet last week, and I'm glad I missed out on the touchdowns. I had touchdowns for Avery Johnson and T-Mac. I got neither one of those, but I'm glad I didn't because I had West Virginia winning. And if I had gone 4 legs and then hit the 5th one and they lost like that, I would have cried. And my wife would say, lay off the parlays.
You got to be quiet here. If she's listening to this, you're going to be in the doghouse.
Becky, I sometimes fabricate information to entertain the masses. There's no truth into what I've said here. So just keep walking because you're walking the dog right now, probably. Ryan Gilbert, what game would you like to start with?
Could start with our friends down I-70. Can start with KU.
West Virginia in Morgantown. They're both 1-2. They're both probably a little bit hungry for a victory. West Virginia by 2.5. What say you?
Both are 1-2, like you said, Fitz, but both are 0-3 against the spread. So if you've been betting on either of these teams, you have not been happy. But interesting game, Fitz. Certainly both teams are, looking to, kind of turn around the season. This is the opportunity to do that. Jalen Daniels, this is the biggest thing that I'm looking at in this game. Nobody's going to argue that he's not a good quarterback. He's been bad in 2024 because of his turnovers. And so you're going up against a West Virginia secondary that is very bad, bluntly put. This could be maybe the coming out party for Jalen Daniels to obviously take his chances like he has against Illinois, against UNLV, where he's getting kind of punished for taking those chances. If he just kind of stays true to his game, stays aggressive, I think this is a great spot against a West Virginia defense that he can take advantage of and put up a lot of points up on the road. So it should be an interesting game without a doubt, man. There's a lot of, for different reasons, interesting games this weekend. But I think Kansas, this could be the game to turn it around. I know I said that last week against UNLV, but play clean. Don't turn the football over. Stay aggressive. Kansas will have a good chance here.
Open up that playbook a little bit. I mean, don't forget you got one of the best running backs in the nation and pound away with him if you need to. Get back to some basics and quit trying to put it all on JD6's shoulders. Very interesting game. Someone's going to leave this game in a world of hurt, and yet they're only 1 game into Big 12. So I know 1-2 sucks in the non-conference. Ask Oklahoma State a year ago, but look what happened. So you can reinvent yourself as you go. Tech plays host to Arizona State. Arizona State has been a little bit of a surprise this year in a good way. Tech has been a little bit of a surprise in a bad way. And now they meet in Lubbock, and the Red Raiders are a 3.5-point favorite. I wouldn't bet on this game, but if you did, what would you do with it?
Well, Fitz, I'd probably stay away from the spread.
I agree.
Texas Tech released the Demons on Saturday against North Texas, and their offense looked great. I mean, you can't deny that. I think, they had a pick six or a fumble for a touchdown, something like that. So they had the defense kind of step up as well, make a play. That's a game that Brooks and Morton were both out of the game by halftime, right? So the biggest thing that I think Texas Tech's offense is great. Defensively, certainly the struggles have been there for a number of games this year. I pulled up the stats here before we started recording, Fitz. Texas Tech's putting up 538 yards per game on offense. That's second in the Big 12. Could very well be the best if they had their foot on the gas for a full 60 minutes last Saturday. But on defensively, they're the second worst team in terms of yards per game in the Big 12 at 461. Only Oklahoma State is worse by like a yard or two. And so, that leans me to bet the over. Arizona, 420 yards of offense versus 270 on defense. They're a little bit more mellow, or I guess level-headed. But Texas Tech, man, just screams like a game where the over can easily get hit. And also Texas Tech, Fitz playing at home. You would hope that the Red Raiders can maybe determine the pace of this game, the way that it will be played. Not saying they'll win or lose, but they should be able to kind of determine the way they want to play, which would, of course, be kind of a shootout like we're used to with Texas Tech teams. So over 59.5 is what I like here.
Okay. And a public service announcement to Arizona State fans. Don't eat the tortillas. Just trust me, don't do it. Next up, we got TCU and SMU, as SMU is apparently trying to be in the Big 12, even though they joined the ACC. This is another game against a Big 12 foe. TCU is a 3.5-point favorite. Games in at SMU in Dallas. What do you think of this one?
Interesting game because both teams are coming off of losses, but TCU just came off of a Big 12 loss last weekend. SMU was coming off of a BYU loss from 2 weeks ago, had an off week because it played in week 0. So just an interesting situation. But bottom line, both teams are coming off of a poor performance. So bad for SMU that it benched its quarterback. They're now riding with Kevin Jennings, who I'm not going to lie, obviously we don't know much about, but SMU trying to make a change. What angle do you kind of want to go at here? Is it going to be tough with a new quarterback leading the offense, or coming off of a loss, you have an extra week to prepare? The sense of urgency should be higher. That's why I'd probably lean SMU at home, the home dog. I'll take the team that, both teams obviously kind of need this one. You talk about KU and West Virginia, it's kind of the same boat for these teams, but I'll go SMU with the new quarterback and an extra week to prepare.
Very good. I would probably agree with you on that. The biggest game in the Big 12 this week is Utah goes to Oklahoma State. Looks like the Utes are 1.5-point favorites in Stillwater, so that's a compliment to them. But your stat you threw out earlier about Oklahoma State's defense has to be concerning. Cam Rising will apparently play for Utah, and that ups their value. They're better on all around. They get the quarterback back and their defense is better. That's how important he is. So do you think Utah goes in there and gets it done?
How many, it went to overtime when Oklahoma State put Arkansas, correct?
Yes.
So I don't know if that maybe skews the numbers a little bit, but still Oklahoma State's defense can't be that great. But Fitz, I don't want to be dishonest and tell the viewers, right, like which way to go here. Obviously, if this game's out in Utah, the home team's going to be favored by at least a field goal. And so the edge, I guess, is there for Utah just in terms of the two teams matching up against each other. But the reason it's only 1.5 is because it's at Oklahoma State, right? It's a home game, should be rocking without a doubt at Boone Pickens. And so I don't want to just not answer this, but I'm more excited to just watch this college football game. It has a huge impact on not only the standings, right, but what Oklahoma State does. Will that carry over, good or bad, in the next weekend against Kansas State as well? So it just should be just an awesome football game, Fitz.
I agree. I'm looking forward to being able to watch it. That's the one nice thing about Big 12 After Dark in our game is we are free to watch a lot of games on TV, including this one. This will set a tone, and both teams have a challenge next week. Utah plays Arizona, and as you mentioned, Oklahoma State comes to Kansas State. And let's get to Kansas State, going to BYU, first trip to Provo. The Wildcats are 6.5-point favorites on the road. Utah is a beautiful state. I'm looking forward to it. I hate the late kick, but BYU is pretty darn good in late kicks. They're also having a white out, so make sure you don't wear your white so you don't get lost in the crowd. I got to keep track of you. Okay. I got to keep track of you. And if you get lost, you're just gone. What do you think about this one?
I like Kansas State, man, and I've gone against the Wildcats against the spread the last 2 weeks. And, my biggest thing was I haven't seen enough. Too many question marks, too many uncertainties, coaching on the roster. There was just a lot of things that I needed to see against Arizona before I could really feel comfortable betting on Kansas State. Well, I saw it. I saw the secondary fix up its mistakes it had against Tulane. I saw the offense move the ball a lot better. Special teams had another splash play and eliminated some of those mental errors that we kind of saw early on in special teams from Kansas State. So I'm more sold. I'm way more sold now than I was a week ago. And it's real interesting, Fitz, that this line is only like a point or two different than the Arizona game. No, I get it. You're playing on the road. But heading into the year, man, I mean, who would have thought that BYU would be 3-0 and that Arizona would be the team that was really struggling? So, I'm sure at the end of the year we can look back, and I'm sure these lines maybe make a little bit more sense when it's all said and done. But I think Arizona is, certainly for K-State to only be favored by a touchdown, to have that same amount, I guess a point less at 6 points against BYU. I like Kansas State. Now, don't get me wrong. I think the situation overall, you have Oklahoma State next week. You're coming off of a big win. You got to stay locked in. It's in the altitude, a whiteout, night game, BYU at home, all those things, the, intangibles, so to speak, those kind of all go against Kansas State. That's a hard, just from that angle, it's hard to find positives. But when you look at what Kansas State did last week, just between the white lines on the field, the way they played, it's hard to not go with Kansas State. So I'm riding with the momentum that Chris Kleiman's squad has.
I agree. And one correction, though, it's pronounced situation. I don't know if you knew that.
I'm sorry.
It's a recent update based on Chris Kleiman dictionary. So, yes, you got to get that right. Ryan Gilbert, thank you. That was sage advice. Very wise.
I think I should ask Chris Kleiman a question about a situation, and we can have like our own little feud like you and Avery Johnson had.
That'd be great. That'd be great. That worked out
well for everyone.
Say what? Yeah, that worked out well for everyone.
Yeah.
I got to find a way to anger more players. Apparently works. Thank you, Ryan Gilbert. Always a fun segment. I'm going to follow some of your advice. Don't tell Becky that I'm placing a bet. It's Kansas State and BYU in Provo, Utah. It's going to be a beautiful setting. There's snow on the mountains in Utah. The leaves are turning apparently, and I'm looking forward to this trip. I'm not looking forward to the 9:30 kick. This game may not be over until 1 a.m. Central, which is midnight in the Mountain Time Zone. So having a local time kick of 8:30 is a little bit much also, but you do this for TV, and K-State is on ESPN this weekend, so it's hard to complain too much. We will have a post-game podcast, not immediately following the game. Nobody wants a 1 a.m. live podcast, but Big B and Cole Carmody will be going live 10 a.m. Central Sunday morning with your Powercat post-game podcast. Hope you can find time to join them. Those live shows have been doing really well. We'll see how it does as a Sunday morning content item. Appreciate you watching, and I really appreciate Weddle & Sons Roofing for their ongoing support of the Powercat Pregame Podcast. I am Fitz, and I'm headed to Provo and looking forward to it greatly. But next week, it's K-State and Oklahoma State. We'll have a whole nother preview, and then I'll see you at the Bill. But I guess you could say if you're going to Provo, I'll see you at the Lavelle. Maybe that doesn't work.
Thank you for watching GoPowercat.com's Powercat Pregame Podcast, sponsored by Weddle & Sons Roofing. This has been a GoPowercat.com and Spirit Street production.